Hello and welcome to Autism in Conversation with Auticon, a podcast from Auticon, a global IT consultancy whose consultants are all autistic. This series is designed to help raise greater understanding and appreciation of autism through fascinating conversations with inspirational guests. Hosted by me, Carrie Grant MBE. Each episode will feature brilliant guests from all walks of life who each share a passion for making the world more inclusive. We'll be talking about the many benefits of hiring neurodivergent talent through to some of the more common challenges faced by autistic adults navigating the workplace, plus much, much more. All of my 4 children are neurodivergent, so this is a subject that's very close to my heart, and I'm really looking forward to facilitating some great conversations about autism and hopefully learning some new things along the way. I hope you enjoy. Hello and a very warm welcome to the latest episode of Autism in Conversation with Auticon. As many of you may know by now, this podcast is all about celebrating the incredible attributes that autistic people often possess, from attention to detail and pattern recognition to exceptional concentration levels and beyond. The unique perspective that a diagnosis of autism often brings can be intrinsically linked to creativity. However, being autistic and having a career in a creative industry is not something that is commonly talked about. In this episode, we'll be exploring why being autistic can lend itself so well to a creative profession, as well as hearing advice from people who've excelled in creative careers. I'm very excited to introduce our incredible panel, which includes English quizzer and television personality Anne Hegerty. Since 2010, she's been a chaser on the ITV game show The Chase. Gemma Harvey, who's a freelance actor, creative support, writer and independent film and theatre maker. Jules Robertson, an actor who's starred across stage and screen. And last but by no means least, we have artist and inspirational speaker Dr. Willard Wigan MBE, best known for being the creator of the world's smallest ever sculptures. What a lineup! Welcome to you all today. So first up, I wanted to ask each of you about diagnosis, certainly to Anne, Jules and Willard. Starting with you, Anne, what came first for you? Was it your career on The Chase or your autism diagnosis?
I started on The Chase in 2010 and I got diagnosed in 2005. So I wasn't yet a chaser at that time.
Yes.
I'd started in about 2003. I had just started beginning to wonder whether perhaps Asperger's syndrome or autism might be something that explained a lot of things about me that I didn't previously understand. And I started pursuing a diagnosis, managed to get one in 2005 from a lady who actually specialised in diagnosing, how do we put this? Children whose IQs are perhaps not as high as mine. At that time, I was working not as a journalist. I worked as a journalist for about 10 years, but for 20 years, I worked as a proofreader in the publishing industry, which was a creative job and did involve I have particular autistic skills that were very applicable to that kind of job. So I find it a lot easier to advise people on how to get into proofreading than I would how to be a chaser, because honestly, I just kind of tripped and fell into the chaser job. It was sort of accidental and just happened to be in the right place at the right time, talking to the right people. But I was diagnosed 2005. What it was mostly useful for, actually, was at the time I was really struggling with my career, and I had help from a social worker and social services generally. And one thing was I actually got disability living allowance, and my job seekers allowance was also bumped up. And I always say there are very few problems that can't be solved with enough money. So that basically was the advantage for me at the time of getting diagnosed.
And what about your feelings about that diagnosis? Did you see it as a positive thing at that point?
Yes, I mean, I was very relieved that that people agreed with me that I'd gone through all the diagnostic criteria. I'd gone through the ICD-10 and also the DSM in America, their criteria for both autism and Asperger's syndrome. And I ticked off just so many things. I actually drew up a spreadsheet of, I drew up a table of criteria and things I used to do as a child, things I still do, things my dad did. And I presented these tables to my GP, and he said, honestly, you know, the fact that you've just done these in itself suggests to me you're probably autistic.
I love that. I love that you probably did a better diagnostic criteria than the one that you were about to face.
Possibly. I mean, I just felt it was important to... People have sometimes said to me, oh, I understand you identify as autistic. I'm like, no, I don't identify as anything in any way. I objectively conform to scientific criteria drawn up by people who aren't me. And I wanted to actually see a specialist because, you know, I could be wrong. Maybe there's some other explanation instead. And I wanted to know what they thought.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I love the way you've explained that and described that. Willard, for you, what age were you and what happened with you in terms of diagnosis?
Well, this lady who works with the Autism Society diagnosed me by looking at me and asking me a few questions. And just she knew what it was because, first of all, she looked at my eyes and found out my eyes would never focus because I had a very hard time in looking straight at somebody. And not only that, I found myself, soon as somebody said something to me, it was like slightly negative, the world ended. But then I had to realise it wasn't. And also I had like a repetitive behaviour problem, which I didn't understand what it was. And also because of having the learning difference as well at school, it was like a combination of all that. It was like, I suppose, it was like being in quicksand, but you're sinking into this autistic world. But at the bottom, you know, there's like a treasure chest of skills that I've found because of the autism. It also made me sort of accept it and use it as an ability to be able to be an inspiration to people who have it and people who don't, because autism is a diamond in a dustbin, because humanity has a habit of underestimating people with learning differences and autism and dyslexia, because they automatically feel that they use the word unable, disable, or whatever they want to use, whatever terms they want to use. But I knew that I had to defend myself with the ability that I had. And my mother told me that because of it, you better... She didn't know that I had it then, because it was back early in the 1960s when I was 5 years old, 6, 7, 8, all the way up. When I made houses for ants, when my dog destroyed an ant's nest, I felt sorry for the ants because I kept thinking all the ants were homeless, so I became possessed.
I love that.
So,
that's such a great concept.
Because I kept thinking all the ants have got nowhere to live, and I took it personal. So I thought if I make lots of little houses for them, they'll all move in. And I made a little. I got a leaf, and I made a palace for the queen ant out of a leaf, and then I made tables and chairs. I made seesaws and swings, and then when I'd made this, because it happened because of my dog destroying this ant's nest, and I had to thank my dog. If I could wake him up from the dead, I'd thank him, because that was when I found out who I was, because I lost me.
Yes.
So when I found me a bit later on in life, but once I made all these little houses for ants and I made furniture for ants and all that, one of the girls next door looked over the fence and seen it, and I heard her say, "Wow, that's the bestest." And then when I heard that word, because when I was at school, my school teacher used to say to me that, because I couldn't spell, I couldn't read, she used to take me around the whole school and tell all the kids about me, and more or less I was a consequence of failure because I couldn't spell, couldn't read, couldn't had disorientation problems, and I couldn't communicate properly. So she says, right, this is what happens to children if they don't listen to the teachers. Because back in the 60s, I'm now 64, nearly 65. So back then, it was allowed. They were allowed to humiliate.
Yeah.
So once I was humiliated, my left leg was in school, my right leg wasn't.
Yeah.
So my body was there, my mind was. So when I ran away from school, I was in the garden making these little houses for ants, and this little girl looked over the fence and she saw what I made, and then she says, "Wow, that's the bestest." Yeah. Now, when I heard that, I tell you what it's like. You see, people who understand autism, if I was doing this at 5 or 6,
flicking your hand,
and just that, and you told me I was really good at that, I'd be doing that for the rest of my life because you just told me that.
Yes.
So what happened when she said to me that was the bestest? It was like being in a shower, and each droplet of water was washing away everything negative that was said to me. So I took it to an extremity. You now just told me that I'm good. And then a mother came down and she told her mother, she said, "Look at that, Mum." And her mum went, "Oh, wow, that's fantastic." So now I'm in the shower again with more encouragement. And then when my mother seen it, my mother said, she was so overwhelmed. My mother said to me, "If you make them smaller, your name's going to get bigger." So I became possessed to create the smallest sculptures in the world. So autism became a message. You see what I mean? It's an education. It's a diamond in the dustbin, because humanity has a habit of throwing autistic people away, invisible, to say, "Oh, you don't exist." But when they take the lid off the dustbin, they realise
there's a diamond in there. Yes.
And that's what autism is. So
can you just, for our listeners, just tell me how tiny, when we say tiny, we're talking really tiny, aren't we, your sculptures?
I can go down to about 5 microns. I made a baby, and I put a baby inside a human hair. And that's the smallest sculpture ever made by man. I put a motorbike inside a hair made of 24-karat gold. And I called it the Golden Journey. I called it the journey to me showing the world how big autism is and how big nothing is. Because the word nothing is what autistic people have been labelled as, nothing. But now we're showing the world how big nothing is, because we are the frontiers of the word nothing. We're showing the world what nothing can achieve, because it's like, yes. I now have an MBE from the Queen. The Queen owns one of my pieces. She invited me to Buckingham Palace. I made a little crown for the Queen, which fits on the head of a pin. And the Queen says to me,
I wonder if she wears it.
The Queen said to me, she said, she's never had something so small that's meant so much. Oh. And that's when I realised then that, this invisible world that I was involved with has made me become internationally known throughout the world. You can't see my work, but when you see it, it's the biggest message ever. And I've always wanted to show the world that never to underestimate, because humanity has a habit of underestimating.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, like if someone's a carpenter and they don't have any qualifications, and the person who is a carpenter has all the paperwork, and they automatically go for the paperwork, and you go, "Oh, just a minute, hold on. Look at this one." And he is someone who's naturally good, yes. And the naturally good one is much better than the one who's been taught within reason. Yes. So that's what I learned then, and that encouragement made me become greater. So I knew then that I had to become the greatest micro artist of all time, because I think being good wasn't enough. So because my mum kept telling me every time I made something. One time I carved all the Beatrix Potter characters on a toothpick. And I carved a little bird on the point of the toothpick, and I showed my mum. She said, "It's too big." I used to sit in my bedroom for 16 hours a day, 17 hours a day.
Wow.
And I kept working, and I just kept going, and I kept going. I used to tell myself that I'm performing an operation on somebody and I've got to save their life, because it was like almost as though I had no choice. I have to, because, from what happened to me in the 60s to now, it's like a revenge, successful revenge, to say, yes, look, you told me I was nothing to that teacher. She was not a nice woman at all. And so here I am now. What are you going to say about it now? Yeah. So now I'm now a message for humanity to understand what autistic people are capable of doing. It's the diamond in the dustbin. They need to uncover it, and then they'll see the beneficial abilities of autism.
I love how you speak. That's amazing, Willard. Jules, acting is your thing. So tell me, were you acting first, or were you diagnosed with your autism first?
I was diagnosed with my autism first, quite early, when I was 2, actually.
Wow,
So,
really young.
Really young, yeah. But my parents didn't really talk about it very much when I was growing up. And then I realised that I wanted to be an actor a bit later in life. And I never would have thought, after doing all those courses, that I would be on Holby City for 6 years. And so it's just, it's very exciting playing someone else. It's really interesting playing someone who isn't you as an actor. And I was a bit worried when I started Holby that they wouldn't, they'd find it hard to work with me because of the autism. But autism can make things quite challenging at times. But also it's it's a special thing to have as well. It's a bit like a superpower at times.
Correct. Yeah, I would say that, because that's what it is. Because do you find that you have to sort of go to another level in whatever you do?
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
do, actually.
It's like when I received my doctorate, I felt like the scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. because they gave me this brain. And there's me holding this scroll, and I thought, here I am. So did you find that you think, oh, right, now they're going to see some more? And again, more starts to come out of you, which you didn't know actually existed.
Yeah.
And that's what it does. I don't know whether you find the same thing.
I think autism is more of a positive thing than a negative thing.
That's right.
Sometimes you can blame your autism for things that you find hard, but it's not always the autism that makes things harder.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'd really like to bring in Gemma, because we haven't heard from you yet. Now, Gemma, you work with Jules. You've worked with Jules. You also work with one of my children on Hollyoaks. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Okay.
Apart from being an actor, a playwright, a filmmaker, and all the other things.
Well, we can talk about that later because that all joins in as well. But my role, creative support, that I have worked with lots of different people as it's a really brilliant and beautiful role. And a lot of people ask me, how did I get into it? And probably a bit similar to what Anne was saying, I did actually just fall into it. I was working with Jules in a social support role, wasn't I? And Jules did his training with a theatre company called Access All Areas, who has a training course in affiliation with Central St Martin's. And I went along with him one day. He was having his headshots taken, and I got chatting to the access manager from Access All Areas, and she mentioned to me about this role, which is it's got lots of different titles, and it's lots of different ways in which people refer to it, but at the moment we're there that creative support kind of covers on screen, TV, theatre. So I contacted Lucy and I was like, I'd really like to get more involved. And so I started by doing some in-house jobs with Access All Areas and working alongside some of their artists. And Lucy Andrews, the access manager, who I just mentioned, really championed me, actually, and was really supportive. And when some brilliant opportunities came up, I had been working with Jules as his creative support at Holby. We worked together for about...
It was a very successul relationship.
It was a very successful
What was
relationship.
that
Yes,
like?
it was.
How did it work, Jules?
Well, Gemma was like my PA.
He does actually introduce me as his PA.
Yeah. And we made a brilliant film together, Love, which you wrote.
We will. Well, we can talk about that later, can't we?
But it was like you were with me on set all day. And,
but also our working relationship begins before that, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you were just like a... support worker in 2017, weren't you?
Yeah.
When you started.
So the role not a lot of people realise, but the role begins before actually the actor gets on set or the actor gets into the rehearsal room, because it's all about the creative relationship and the relationship between the artist, the actor, and the creative support. And it's all about understanding what their independent needs are, and supporting them to be the best actor that they can be. Really straightforward, actually. So each job is completely different because it's dependent on that individual.
That actor, yeah. I know the work that you did with my child on Hollyoaks. You were really, like, I would say, the liaison between the director and the actors.
Yeah.
You were very good at translating when I was standing on set in those early days, because obviously Ty was only 16, and I'd be thinking, I'm not sure Ty will understand what that director's just said. They've just said something that's really kind of not just complicated, but is really in talk. Mm-hmm. And how on earth is my child, who's never been on a set before, going to understand that level of in talk? And you were really good at translating. You were probably actually translating for some of the other actors as well.
Well, you know, it's funny you should say that, because as an actor, I have learned so much from doing this job, because particularly on set for shows like Holby City and Hollyoaks, it is so fast-paced that often the director doesn't have time to communicate properly with the actors. And I learned so much from working with Jules, and then obviously was able to take that onto my work on Hollyoaks, because often, as you said, Carrie, they will throw out a direction that just does not make sense. And in the past, as an actor, I will have been given directions like that, and I will have just gone, oh, well, I'm just going to make it work because, well, that's what I'm here to do. And then probably my performance wasn't particularly great because I didn't understand what that director was trying to say. Whereas my role as creative support is, as you say, being that liaison and making sure that if something is said, to jump in, you know, just really kindly and in conversation, but just saying, oh, hang on a minute, can we just clarify that? And most of the time, it proves that the director probably didn't know exactly what they wanted to say.
Yes.
So then it creates a conversation between all of us, and then, you know, they smash it.
Yes. And what was it like for you, Jules, working with Gemma? Do you think that... has Gemma always been with you, or has there been times where Gemma's not been there?
There were times when you weren't there.
You had different creative skills sometimes.
Yes, but you were one of the best ones.
One of.
Yeah.
You've got to say that. For you, I'm just thinking for you, Anne, as well, just bringing you back in, sometimes working in television can be incredibly highly pressurised. It's a high-pressure job, isn't it? Do you ever have anyone that helps you?
Not remotely as much as I'd like. I do find something that I do find stressful is things suddenly changing on me. And not only that, but another thing I find intensely stressful is when everything is coming at me via the ears, and I would like to see it in writing.
Yes.
And this can be a major... I mean, this is... I have a brilliant agent whom I love, and he just looks after me so much. And he is the person that I will call at 10 o'clock at night if I've, just done something stupid and something he's doing to the house. But one problem is he is someone who does not really like doing things in writing. A couple of months ago, I wanted to show him something on my phone, and I passed it across to him and said, read that. And he read it out loud. And I thought, oh, I see. You really do struggle with reading unless it's actually coming to you through the ears. Whereas if we try and have a conversation, I'll start it off in writing, and then in like 5 minutes' time, he'll be all, can I call you? So I message back to him, yes, you can call me. And I pick up my notebook and a pen because I know that I'm not going to make sense of anything he says to me on the phone unless I write it down. Because I was trained as a journalist about 40 years ago. One of the things that they taught you to do in those days was shorthand. Yeah. And I still use my shorthand. So if anyone is on the phone to me, I'll write down what they're saying because I've got no idea what they're saying. It's going straight through the ear, into the hand, onto the page, and then I'll transcribe it back and then I'll know what they said.
Yes. And in terms of working on the show, on The Chase, it is quite highly pressured up there. I've done the show.
One of the things I find extremely difficult, and this happens quite a lot, is being asked to get in earlier than I was expecting. I am someone who wakes up very slowly, and I need like an hour after I've got up to have coffee and have the internet and do a few quizzes just to kind of wake my brain up. And I can't do anything for the first hour except drink coffee and go on Facebook.
Yes.
And other people probably think it's terribly lazy, but I just can't wake myself up any faster than that. And then if they suddenly decide, oh, we want you in half an hour earlier than usual, it's really, really difficult. And I do struggle with that. And sometimes you get told that almost at the last minute. And I'm like, if we have something else that needs to be done in the day, couldn't we try doing it at the end of the day instead of slotting it in at the beginning? And they're like, no, we can't work like that. We don't understand the idea of working like that. I suspect it probably comes from like 120 years ago when cinema was first starting out and everything had to be done by natural light. And so films started filming at like 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And they haven't really got past that idea. In the Middle Ages, everyone was like, you must go to bed early and you must get up early. And the reason for that was they didn't have natural light. Everything everything was farm work. People, couldn't really do things that involve reading and writing because nobody invented reading glasses yet. So everything was done by natural light and you had to start early in the morning.
But isn't this mad?
You don't have to do that anymore.
No, exactly. Like, I think we're a little bit past that now in telly, right?
Yeah.
You'd think.
Oh, my God.
Early morning starts are hard on set. It's very hard to sleep well the night before if you know you're on. You have to be picked up at 6 a.m. It's very hard to get to sleep the night before.
Yeah.
And for you, what about learning lines for you, Jules? How are you on that?
I'm improved at that. I like learning lines with you.
Thanks.
And but yeah, on set it can be a really long day because you're with people all day and you need. I need a break anyway for me, and it's quite hard when you don't get as long of a break as you want.
Yeah, exactly. If I can just jump in quickly there, because what Anne said was so resonant of the reasons behind creative support, and you saying that you don't have the support or as much support as you would like, and hearing you talk about the bolting on at the beginning of the day and the changing of scheduling, that obviously happens in the TV work that Jules works in, and it's all about like the managing of that and understanding. And I think where we're at the moment is the way in which production is made. It's still so archaic, as we were just talking about. We do it in a way in which, well, it's just always been done like that. Well, why has it always been done like that? And actually, if people considered each independent person and how they work best, then we would probably have better productions, but it's just about people don't want to make those changes, or people don't consult people who understand what those people need, and so just assume that that's going to be okay. And I think a lot of agents are scared to ask for those changes to be made because they think that maybe it's rocking the boat and therefore their client won't be employed.
So that's interesting. Anne, did you disclose your autism before you started the chase?
I did, but I don't really think it meant very much to them. And I was just so excited to have this job and sort of, didn't want anyone to think, oh, maybe we've hired the wrong person. Maybe she's going to be trouble. I'm always slightly obsessed with not being high maintenance for anyone.
Yeah.
I'm always the one that doesn't throw their weight about.
Yes.
What Jules was saying about learning lines was interesting because I do panto most Christmases. And I found that one of the things I've worked out that the rehearsal period is actually much more tiring and stressful than the actual run. And one reason for that, it's not just that you're trying to learn your lines, but it's also that during the rehearsal period, the panto you're doing is kind of Schrodinger's panto. Everything exists in one mode and another mode and several other modes at the same time because every scene, somebody has an idea, shall I do it this way or shall I do it that way? And they're just trying to work out, are we going to have this song in here or aren't we? And in your head, they exist as two scenes, the scene where you have the song and the scene where you don't have the song. Yeah. So you feel as if you're actually rehearsing 15 pantos at once.
Yes.
And then by the time you've got as far as at least the tech run, it's all kind of collapsed down into one panto, and it's just 2 hours twice a day, and then you can actually handle it. I think the best panto I ever did was the one Christmas just gone, but the most stress-free panto I ever did was in 2019 in Middlesbrough, where it was run by two guys who just do 2 pantos a year, one in Middlesbrough, one in Stockport, and they kind of didn't get overstretched. They had the panto written months before, and as soon as you got there for rehearsals, right from the start, they had the music director there, they had the dancers there, and they ran absolutely everything in real time. So right from the beginning, you knew exactly what was in and what wasn't, how long everything was going to take. And if anyone had a brilliant idea at the last minute, basically, the last minute was too late. You needed to have had the brilliant idea 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
So everything was just so smooth. You were never in doubt about what was going to be in and what wasn't.
There's a sense of predictability then to what's going to happen.
And there's a sense of just knowing what you're doing, what everyone else is doing, rather than having all these possibilities flying around, which, as I say, make you feel like you're doing 15 pantos at once.
Yeah. I'm really struck, actually, just by having you guys as guests today, that Willard has a totally different career to everybody else here, in the sense that these guys have to really socially interact a lot on set, in rehearsrsals. For you,
well, it's interesting me. It's interesting listening to them, because it's a different ball game to what I do. But I watched The Chase. I saw that on The Chase. She'd frighten me to death if I was on there. But, respect to Anne and respect to everybody here, because we all have a little story to tell. And, it's an inspirational podcast, this is. It really is.
You look a bit like Idris Elba, actually, if you don't mind.
I'll get that. but
for all our people listening that are trying to imagine what Willard looks like, thanks for that, Jules. But Willard, so your work is like solitary. You're on your own for 17 hours, you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, see, with my work, right, I have to find my own little world, because, you see, after losing myself through autism, and not knowing where I was, not knowing who I was, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, you see. And, and in the middle, something was missing, and the bit that was missing was myself. So I found me when I found, out that I had autism. And I thought, right, now I've got it, then, okay, I'll accept it. But I've got to do something about it, you see. So, when I started creating my artwork, I started to understand that I had to do something slightly different. I had to learn to hold my breath and work in between my heartbeat. And work 16, 17, 18 hours a day. And then once I was doing the work and I'd finished it, I was never really satisfied with what I did, because it didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to people who see it, because my work is for them. It's just like Anne and everybody else. They do it not just for themselves, it's for others.
It's received,
it's received, and when I create this work and I hear people going, oh my God, and lots of strong words.
Yeah.
And I can hear it. And I thought, well, so there you are. It belongs to you. And then I'd say to myself, no, it's not good enough. I'm going to put 14 camels in the eye of a needle, which I have. And then I'd say, right, I'm going to put 22 in the eye of a needle, including the piper playing the flute and 21 children all dancing inside the needle. I think, yeah, okay. So what it is, because I hear the gasping, I hear the breaths going.
I'm gasping just thinking about it. I've not even seen it, and I'm gasping.
I remember one time, and there's a gentleman there who used to spar with Mike Tyson, a great big Irish guy by the name of Joe Egan, ex-boxer.
Yeah.
And he looked down the microscope at my exhibition, and he moved his head away, and I saw tears coming down his eyes. And he says, when I sparred with Mike Tyson, he never knocked me out. He didn't knock me out, but your work did.
Oh,
and then he says,
beautiful.
And such a big man liking such tiny little sculptures. And then I realised that people with no attention span started to love my work, and that's what made me become sort of possessed.
Interesting.
So I sometimes I don't sleep much, because at one time I was working away. I was working on Cinderella's carriage, and what had happened.
What, for the show, Cinderella?
Yeah, the carriage itself, the whole thing.
No, in the eye of a needle.
In the eye of a needle.
His work is... There's the tiniest pieces of art you could ever imagine. They're teeny tiny.
Inside the eye of a needle. I make sculptures that fit inside the eye of a needle.
Struggling to imagine that.
Yeah.
Jules' face is brilliant right now. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
But I'll explain. What I was doing, I was making Cinderella's carriage. And what happened, when I work, I have to make different types of tools. Some tools have little hooks on. I have a microscopic sharpened pieces of tungsten and very hardened steel, and little diamonds crushed up and broken up into like little splinters. They look like little bee stings. And they're in the end of a little hypodermic needle, which a friend of mine who's a microsurgeon gave me. And what I do, I've got another tool which manipulates the gold and shapes it. And I made this beautiful carriage, Cinderella's carriage, shaped like a pumpkin, and all the wheels and the coachmen were there with the whips made of spider's web.
Wow.
So, the small little spiders, I got some of their webs, And I made the whips, I made the coachmen with the buttons on their shoes, everything, the little bows in the back of their hair, everything. I was working away, a fly flew underneath the microscope, and the breeze from the fly's wings blew them all away.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was the most sickening feeling ever for me. And I told myself I'm not going to do it again because I just couldn't bring myself to doing it. And one time I was working through the microscope on one of my really tiny pieces, and I fell asleep and my eyes were pressed against the microscope. And when I looked in the mirror, I had 2 round circles.
Oh, my gosh.
Because, that's how much, intensity I put into my work.
So tell me something. Was it... You talk about this breakthrough moment when the little girl looks over the fence and says the bestest, right? That's a clearly breakthrough moment for you. You've also talked about your autism diagnosis as being breakthrough, but there's some decades between those two moments.
Yeah,
what difference did being told that you're autistic make?
Well, I'll tell you what it did to me. It thought to me, well, why am I hiding behind my learning differences? Why am I hiding behind this condition? I might as well tell people that I have this problem. Not a problem, sorry. Blessing.
Yeah.
I have this blessing. So now I feel a lot better because we did a documentary called The World's Tiniest Masterpiece, which won an award. And, so then I thought, well, there you are then. So now I'm going to, climb to the top of the mountain and sing an autistic song, so people can hear it, because this is what it's done for me. It's made me feel more confident about myself. When you get invited to Buckingham Palace and the Queen's looking down the microscope, she tells you that.
Did you meet the Queen?
Yeah.
Did you like her? Was she nice?
Yeah, she's a nice lady.
Yeah.
Then she saw my work and she was like, she's never seen something so small that meant so much.
Wow.
And then, and I'm thinking, I'm trying to see if the alarm clock's going to go off so I could wake up. You know what I mean? Because you're there, and it was like a dream. You see, and she has it in her private studies, and then when I went to Chelsea Flower Show, I did a little exhibition there, and before the Chelsea Flower Show opens up, all the exhibitors have to stand by the exhibits because the royalty was coming in to have a look, and Princess Anne said to me, "We come specially to see your work."
Wow.
And it was such a great feeling. Beatrix and Eugenie was looking through the microscope, telling me about the sculpture I made for their grandmother. And then that was it. So when I hear all that, I think, oh, they've seen nothing yet. So you know what I mean? It's like it's like this great feeling to know that. And the bad news is I'm getting better.
That's incredible. I love that attitude.
Yeah.
So all 3 of you, super successful. Also, most of the work that you do takes real super focus. What you do takes a lot of focus. Maybe I'll come to you last, Willard, because yours really is crazy amounts of hours of focus. But for you, Anne, is there ever a point where you think I might just lose interest in this?
I can't imagine ever losing interest in the chase because, honestly, it is, in a sense, the easiest job I've ever done. I say, I wake up in the morning and then I have to sort of talk myself through, go and make a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Okay, now you have to go and have a shower. Now you have to actually dry yourself off and then get dressed and choose what you're going to wear and make sure you've got everything that you need in your bag and your phone is charged, and you are plodding through this kind of checklist of just simply getting on with life, essentially.
Yes.
And then, get in the car, drive yourself to the studio, which is much easier for me than having them send me a car.
Yes.
And then, you go to the dressing room and you sit down and you get made up and then you get into your costume. And then I'm down on the floor, studio floor, getting mic'd up. And at that point, I'm starting thinking, well, I've done all the difficult stuff. Now I just have to do the easy bit, which is be the governess and answer questions. I can do that. I can do that in my sleep. So,
I love that.
all the tough stuff is now behind me. That's the difficult stuff I'm going to do in the day. And this is the cool stuff.
Yes.
Can I just say something else as well?
Yes.
We've not discussed this, but it feels to me like it's relevant to work in the creative industries, and that's the question of fame. When I was a child, I always wanted to be famous. I wasn't quite sure what I could be famous at, but I always wanted to be a famous writer or a famous artist or an actor or a singer or something like that. And my mother thought this was terribly arrogant and stuck up of me. But I've come to realize I thought I'd got over my desire for being famous, but I never really did. And I think what I've come to work out is when you're autistic, there are kind of two conflicting ideas in your head. One of them, well, at least in my case, this probably doesn't apply to all autistic people, but in my case, I like a huge amount of alone time, a huge amount of downtime.
Yes.
I like a lot of silence.
Yes.
We all need that.
Everyone is nodding.
I think most people like a lot of that. But combined with that, there's always the little voice in the back of your head saying, well, it's just as well that you want to be on your own because nobody likes you. If you did want to be with anybody, you wouldn't be able to be because nobody likes you and nobody wants to be your friend. And I think that becoming famous kind of confirmed me in my belief I like being alone not just because I have to. It's not just me making the best of having to be alone. It is an actual thing that I actually prefer. And I could not properly have worked that out without having the experience of being famous, without knowing I genuinely could have a truckload of people around here if I wanted.
Yes.
And I genuinely am more comfortable being on my own.
And you are getting so many nods around the table from this.
Yeah.
Let's go straight over to Willard. I can see you nodding.
I don't know where you're coming from because I felt alone as a child, and even though I grew up to the age I am now, I still feel that my solitude was my salvation.
Yes.
Because
But at the same time, you worry, is it my fault that I haven't got any friends?
Well, you do have friends, but you sometimes, like you said, and your solitude is more important because I found that when I was told I was illiterate and everything else, I thought, well, okay then, so I might as well be illiterate by myself.
Yeah.
I might as well talk to the insects, which I used to. If I saw a butterfly, that butterfly didn't care whether I was autistic or had a learning difference. A dog wouldn't care. So I mean, so dogs and animals.
But that's because also you had so much shame put on you
Yeah.
when you were young.
So I mean, that's right. Yeah. Carrie,
But it's a combination of those things, do I want to be on my own because I actually like being on my own, or am I just sort of ashamed of myself and think I don't deserve to be with other people?
Yeah.
And then when you get famous, you can actually separate those two things. I don't have that shame anymore, and I still like being on my own. So
yeah,
at least now
it's
I
like a
know
choice, isn't it?
I really
You've
want
got
to
a
be on my own.
choice, Anne. You can be on your own if you want to, and like you said, you can have a truckload of people around you if you want to. You know what I mean? So it's a good thing because you can find your solitude.
Yeah.
It charges your batteries. Your batteries will get charged.
Absolutely.
And
But
that's-
sometimes you can't work that out until you have become famous and you have the option, and then you realise which of those options you want.
I really like that this conversation has gone in a totally different way because you guys are basically interviewing each other, which is wonderful. But going over to Jules then, would you say, because these guys have both said that same thing, fame, suddenly people do like you or they like your work and you have the status and all of that. Are you someone who likes to be on your own though?
Sometimes, but I do get lonely. Yeah, but it's hard when you really want a girlfriend.
Okay,
and
just a shout out right now. Shout out for Jules.
And you think, oh, why do women not like me? And I've been feeling that way recently. So,
Oh, I love your
One thing I
honesty.
came to realise was it wasn't that I was unattractive, it was that I was failing to pick up on the signs. I think, that there were boys and later there were men who might well have been interested in me, and I didn't spot that was what they were trying to convey.
Yeah. We've had conversations about that, haven't
yeah,
we?
yeah.
Yeah.
I love
yeah.
it. We've suddenly got Gemma and Jules having a bit of a...
Well, only because Jules did mention it before. Our film
yes.
is about unrequited love.
So this is a film that you've written and Jules
Yes.
stars in.
Yes.
Tell
I
us
play
about it.
Oscar,
Yes.
and he's he's got a crush on a waitress that he likes, but he takes her friendliness the wrong way, doesn't he? He misunderstands.
Yeah.
And you really do feel for his character in this.
Yeah, and I was inspired to write it after a conversation that we'd had, actually, when we were waiting around at Holby City.
When we were
as you do.
we were laughing about the surgeons wearing chef hats because the actors don't know how to do it. It was making me laugh so much.
we did a lot of that, didn't we? Jules said to me that he was desperate to be a movie star, but he couldn't ever imagine it happening. And when I asked him why, he said, because I'm autistic. And so...
And I didn't want to play Jason forever. I
Exactly.
wanted to do other characters.
Yeah, exactly. And then that led to other conversations, and I then started to do a bit of research, and I realised that there's very little out there telling stories from the perspective of someone with autism, as opposed to the story being about autism. So I made it my mission to go and write one.
I hope you see it, Carrie, the movie.
I'm definitely going to see it, yeah, for sure.
But that's why, for me, this is so important. And it's lots of things that we've just talked about. And particularly what you said, Anne, a lot of the inspiration came from spending time with Jules and realising that sometimes what he said out there in the world was often taken the wrong way. And for me, that has always been so interesting because society is so quick to jump, and presume that someone is coming from a certain angle. And that's absolutely not the case. And I just think that we live in such a fast-paced world that often people are unable to just stop and think and go, oh, hang on a minute, I wonder why maybe they're saying that, or maybe why they're saying it that way. And yeah, that was a big inspiration for the film, and particularly Unrequited Love, because that is universal. Everyone has experience, I'm sure.
And rejection is hard for anyone.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way that Oscar is rejected, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
it's
'Cause
not-
he's not
it's
a
not
bad
an unkind
person.
way.
He doesn't know how to handle those emotions.
Exactly.
It's very hard for him.
Exactly, and that's another big thing that the film covers. So.
I love this. Right, I'm going to finish on a question to each of you. So, same question. Because you're all successful at what you do and you're all in different chosen fields, what would you say to a young autistic person growing up now who perhaps feels, or a parent with a child who's thinking, this is so difficult, school's not working for my child, or the child is thinking, I maybe don't have so many friends and no one appreciates me at school, and I feel like an alien in this space at school. What would you say to the young you, I guess, growing up? Let's go first to Anne.
As I say, I don't really know how to advise either the young me or anyone else how to get a job as a chaser, because it's a job that basically didn't exist. And it just happened to be created, and I was the right person in the right place at the right time. The job that I've done in my life that I actually think is most suited to autistic people is being a proofreader. Because I've just... different autistic people are different, but for me, reading and writing came really easily. Detail came really easily, and spotting mistakes that other people wouldn't have thought of came really easily. And that was a job that I felt was very appropriate to an autistic person. The problems I had was keeping on top of the admin, because proofreaders are also self-employed. So it wasn't, I mean, if I'd been asked, say, 14, 15 years ago, how would you really like to work? I would have said, well, I would like to just have a big room with a big table, and all the proofs just kind of arrive, and I can sit down and do it, and someone takes it away, and someone else deals with all the admin, and somehow the money just turns up in the bank account without me actually having to do anything about it. I would never have said, I want a change of job and I want to be on the telly and be famous, because that wasn't really occurring to me.
Yeah. That's what we have agents for these days, right?
Well,
so
yes.
They do all the admin. And Jules, for you, what would you say to that young person growing up that's autistic that maybe doesn't have the encouragement?
Just to believe that they can make it. It's not easy for anyone, especially when you have a condition that a lot of people don't understand. But I'd say that that I want to prove that people with actors with Asperger's and autism and actresses can make it just as well as neurotypical actors. So I think sometimes it is hard to believe in yourself. I just say to just keep trying, really.
Yeah. Thank you, Jules. And Gemma, as creative support to actors, do you see your job that part? Do you think there'll be more of you out there? Because I think you're probably the only
more
one.
More Gemmas would be great.
Thank you, Jules. Yes, and actually, that's why I'm so grateful that I've been invited today. So much of the industry doesn't even understand that the role exists, and unfortunately, that is due to lack of crediting. Most of my work has never been credited, so it's really hard for people to understand why the role is there, that the role is there, and the importance of the role. And interestingly, a lot of the time, the role is brought on as a bolt-on, as a panic from production companies. What needs to happen is people need to recognise that actually creative support needs to be there right from the start, and not to just like shove it in there at the end and go, oh, actually, we'd like to tick a box, so, how can we do that? So hopefully awareness of the role and understanding will then create more opportunities.
And Willard, let's finish with you.
I would say when a child is autistic, they must remember that they're the ugly duckling. The ugly duckling turns into a swan.
Yeah.
And they have to believe in themselves, which a lot of them do because they have the ability to take it to another level. Encouragement's good. And, once they're told that they're good at something and encouraged, shown what they're good at, that'll emerge. Something will emerge. It's like the little beanstalk, a bean growing into like a great beanstalk, and the leaves branch off into success. And that's what autism is. It's like a seed of success. But people need to sort of water it and, nurture them and let them know who they really are. And then they'll find themselves. So autism is a seed to success. And the ugly duckling and the swan.
I love it. In a field of sunflowers, be that beanstalk. Yeah. Thank you so much to Anne Hegerty, to Gemma Harvey, to Jules Robertson, and to Dr. Willard, Wigan MBE. Thank you for being my guest today. I feel like I have been amongst so much success. I'm hoping some of it just rubs off on me. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Autism in Conversation with Auticon. This episode was recorded in April 2022 and contributors are using community preference language at this time. Recording and production was at Strathmore Studios in Clerkenwell, London, and it was engineered and edited by Billy Godfrey, and music was by The Lethargies. If you'd like to know more about the podcast, would be interested in applying for a job as an Auticon consultant, or would like further information about how Auticon can help support your business, please visit auticon.co.uk. That's all from us this time. Bye for now.